Dan Martell, welcome to the show. This is going to be a lot of fun.
Craig, I'm pumped to be here. Super honored, and I will make a commitment that I'm going to try to make this one of the most insightful and valuable podcast episodes you've ever done. And I know you've done tons, so it's a big order, but we're gonna at least shoot our shot, or at least call it.
Well, one of my goals is going to be the same goal that I had when I had Ed Milet in my podcast, and you and Dan and I were just talking about Ed before this because Ed's a legend. And my goal was to ask Ed a question he had never been asked before, and I pulled it off. So I'm going to try and ask you. I know you're probably doing the rounds of these podcasts, so I'm going to try and ask you a question that you've never been asked before. But I want to start with something basic, which is, who are you? What do you do? Where are you from? And where are you living now?
Cool. I'm Dan Martell. I am the CEO of SaaS Academy, which is the largest CEO coaching company for software entrepreneurs. So B2B SaaS. We've coached a lot of people in this space. So like Alex Ramosi, a lot of people know Alex from Hyros. He just exited for 110 million. I've coached.
Oh, Alex Becker.
Yeah. He just did a SPAC. So that was really fun working with him. Everybody from Garrett J. White, Ryan Levesque, Ryan Dice. I mean, as you know, anybody in software world, in internet marketing, they usually find me. Yeah. That's been my 25 years of just like starting off writing code. But so SaaS Academy is kind of like my passion area in my life. And then I have my investment world, which is High Speed Ventures. So I've invested in 50 plus software companies. One just went public last week, Get Around. I've invested in like Intercom, Udemy, Unbounce, like just amazing founders. I'm super blessed there. And then I pretty much share everything I know online for free. That's kind of my MO. I just put it out as soon as I learn something cool or new. I put it out in the world, and then that's kind of what I do day to day.
Yeah, I watched one of your YouTube videos last week and I was like, oh man, this guy is speaking my language, because the cool thing in your book, Buyback Time. So we're going to talk a lot about Dan's new book, Buyback Time, which is out this January, and you want to be able to get a copy of it. And we'll talk about, it's all on Amazon. But is there a specific site that you want people to go to?
Buybackyourtime.com is the best, Craig, because I literally, my publisher wouldn't let me put a lot of certain diagrams and frameworks. So I created kind of like the download. So you can go buy it on any one of your sites and just come back and just go redeem all those bonuses.
Yeah. So there's a lot of cool stuff that we're going to talk about, because Dan runs his empire he runs a SaaS empire in 6 hours a week.
In regards to the amount of time I'm on a call, yes.
Okay.
But it's interesting because like somebody asked me that the other day, like how much time do you spend running the company? I only have 2 direct reports, my CRO and my COO. So yes, it's 6 hours, but like, I read a lot. I talk to a lot of smart entrepreneurs. Like I've been a fan of your stuff, Craig, as I mentioned earlier, for years. So yeah, I'm an avid learner. So it's kind of funny because what's work when essentially I get paid for insights. And if I'm studying and talking to other entrepreneurs to gain new insights to bring to my clients, is that really work? So I don't want to mislead people, but
right. And then
operating.
And then, I've seen your social media posts and all this stuff. You've done an Ironman, or you're training for one?
I've done 5. I did 2 halves and a full this summer. Next year I'm switching over to Spartan races and 50K ultra. So yeah, cool. Pretty active. I train, and off season right now is about 10 hours a week. And then, at the peak, it's like 25, but
the reason why I ask you that is because I would imagine like you are working while you're on the bike, like because you're thinking, problem solving, stuff like that. Like, so would that be true? A little bit.
Not only that, we can walk through a bunch of different ways. I call it net time. Like I literally just got back from a workout with 2 of my coaching clients. So like technically I was working, but they just happen to live in Kelowna. And you asked me where I'm from, originally from the East Coast of Canada, spent a lot of time in Silicon Valley and obviously the software Disneyland, and then live now in Kelowna, BC on the West Coast of Canada. Yeah. So I do have like, I don't know, probably a dozen clients in the city. So like, I always put things together. So I like, honestly, when I was training for Ironman, my running partner was a client. So like, we're obviously doing meetings that way. Yeah. So I have a gym in my house, the Pain Cave. And like, I have a bike set up with Zwift, and literally all my internal meetings, any meeting requests that somebody asked of me, I did on my bike for training during my like peak training times. So like, cause you got to do 3-4 hour sessions, you might as well be talking to somebody. It just helps things get by. So I'm always looking for ways to kind of compress things together.
Well, I'm grateful that you didn't do this podcast on the bike
No,
today.
no, no. Podcast definitely not. No, heavy breathing and spandex do not work well.
There you go. So now, before we get into the time secrets, because people who listen to my stuff always want to hear about being more productive, I actually have a parenting question for you. But before we even get into the parenting question, I want you to tell the story that's in your book about when you were younger and how you got into trouble, because I have a very important question to follow up on that.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in a pretty dark place. My mom was an alcoholic. Dad was in sales. So I was second oldest of four, kind of got diagnosed with ADHD, anger issues at a very young age. When I was 11, I actually got taken out of my home and put into crisis unit for a couple months and then put into foster care. And pretty much between the ages of 11 and 13, 14, I was in and out of the system. Eventually I got released to back to my parents. Then they got divorced. Then I got put into foster or group homes because I got in trouble with the law. And I just kind of went through this pattern of just feeling super I didn't have any self-worth. And then also just I honestly grew up believing I was broken because I was taking this pill that, Adderall at the time that Ritalin at the time that people said, if you don't take this, you can't come to school. And wow. So I always felt broken. And, what happened was I ended up in prison or juvenile detention when I was 15, got out and thought I'd sober up and change my life. And things just spiraled out of control to a place where I had stolen a car. I was high and drunk and I had a handgun in a backpack sitting next to me. And I told myself, if the cops catch me or stop me, I'm going to pull the gun and let them do their job. And I ended up taking a routine roadblock and got into a high-speed chase. And this is in Sussex, New Brunswick, if you know New Brunswick at all, but ended up in a neighborhood and thought I could kind of hide out in a garage. And I came in way too fast into this guy's yard and smashed in the side of the house and wasn't wearing a seatbelt and airbags go off. And I went for the gun. And for whatever reason, I was pulling on it, just got stuck and kept pulling on it. And eventually the cops opened the door, grabbed me, and I essentially floated across the front lawn. My feet didn't touch the ground. And
wow,
I woke up sober the next day. Honestly, wondering what my life was going to look like. I was in a dark spot and I started praying and said, if anybody's looking out, I could use some help. Don't know who you are, what but, and I was just willing to be, just good. There was no grand scheme or anything. And I ended up in prison for 6 months in an adult facility in St. John, New Brunswick, because they had these two juvenile blocks, cell blocks. And after that, I worked on myself and kind of had good behavior release. I got released to a rehab center for 11 months to kind of finish out. I had a 2-year sentence and got out some time. But this place called Portage, and literally that place saved my life. It kind of allowed me to understand my emotions and my story and the meaning I had created and my anger issues, and rebuilt the trust with my family and helped my family heal and just work through a lot of the trauma that I'd experienced. And at the end of that program, I was helping Rick, the maintenance guy, clean out one of the cabins because it was built on an old church camp. And in one of the rooms, there was a old 486 computer and a yellow book on Java programming sitting next to it. And I just opened up this book thinking it's probably ones and zeros or hieroglyphics, it's computer, it says programming, software programming. And it read like English. If anybody's ever seen JavaScript, that's what Java looks like. And I just followed the book, chapter 1, got the computer started. And after about 20 minutes, I got the computer to say, hello world.
Wow.
And I thought, maybe I know, it was so weird. I had this belief that maybe my brain is broken because I'd made so many bad decisions that maybe I'm a secret. Back then, I don't know if you remember who Doogie Howser was, but I thought I was the Doogie Howser. It made no sense. Okay. But it honestly didn't matter. What happened is software became my new obsession. I literally would code for dozens of hours at a time till 2 or 3 in the morning. When I got out, my dad was just so excited that I found something I was passionate about that wasn't illegal. He'd been begging for that for years. And then I just, I'd always been entrepreneurial, as you can imagine, living on the streets and like, running certain crowds of people. I had entrepreneurial traits. And I just started building software products for myself, for my friends, for, eventually my dad. And that's how I've, since then I've built 5 companies, exited 3, 2 were venture backed out of Silicon Valley, all my investments, and now coach over 3,000 software CEOs. It's kind of nuts to like look back at my life over the last 25 years to kind of how it looks like today. I mean, it's 2 different worlds.
It's pretty powerful. And I remember from the book, there was also another kind of inciting incident where I may have the gentleman's name wrong, but I think it was Brian, yeah, a security guard or something. And he asked, what did he ask you? And how pivotal was that moment for you?
Yeah. I mean, that was like the moment that the belief inside shifted. I had gotten in a fight with this kid named Kurt over coffee of all things, but in prison, doesn't take much. Mm-hmm. Ended up getting sentenced to the hole, which is solitary confinement for 3 days. 3rd day, door opens. It's Brian. He's sitting there shaking his head, super disappointed. He was on vacation when the fight happened. Just says, "Follow me," and I'm following him. And like Brian was one of those. He was one of the prison guards that, like he would look the other way, but if you respected him, he would, let you get a second dessert or stay up a little bit later or whatever. Like he wasn't strict like a lot of the other guards. So a lot of people, a lot of the inmates just had a lot of his respect. They respected him. And so, I could tell he was disappointed because he saw me trying to like stay out of stuff and keep to myself. And he walks me back to the cell block, and we end up going past the door, which is usually where we enter, into the other door, which is the guard unit. And the guard unit overlooks, we'd never seen inside. We're not supposed to be in there. It's the one-way mirror. It's the inside of the one-way mirror. And he asked me to sit down, and he just asked me, he looks at me, he goes, "What are you doing here?" And I go, "Well, I got in a fight with Kurt," and he goes, "No, not that." He goes, "What are you doing here in jail?" And I was like, "Well, I got in a high-speed chase and I had guns and my truck, my record." And he goes, "No, not that, Dan." He goes, "I've been watching you stay out of trouble, and I've been working here for a decade, and I've seen a ton of kids just like you. And I want you to know that I have, like, it makes no sense that you're here and you don't belong here and you're not like the rest of the kids." And I don't know if it was like nobody had ever said something like that in my life at that point, but there's just something, because he didn't have to do it. Like literally, it wasn't even his job to like take me out of the hole, right? It was somebody else's. And like, he didn't have to pull me aside and share this with me. And it's just like internally, it's just like something snapped where I was like, well, if Brian sees this, and he would know because he's seen hundreds of kids come through this program, like maybe he's right. And I just started this seed of belief that like, okay, I don't belong here. Cause like growing up, Craig, I knew I wasn't a bad kid. I knew I did bad things. Like every kid in my neighborhood wasn't allowed to play with me because I was that kid. I'd have to like hide in the woods. Yeah. I had to hide in the woods. Like my neighbor, Chris Lyons, parents, no, Dan, you can play with Pierre and Mo, my 2 brothers, not Dan. I was that kid in my neighborhood. Huh. So like for years, I just always felt like I was like labeled. I was like the black sheep, or like I had a cloud over me, or just there was something like, but inside I was like, I'm kind of I have a kind heart. I know I do bad things, but it's not who I was. And like Brian just believed in me in a way that I didn't even believe in myself, and just started to essentially, plant that seed that has now become kind of core to who I am. I mean, my favorite thing to do in other people is I tell them about them. I tell them about the genius I see inside of them, because it takes nothing. It costs nothing. And it can be some of the most powerful things you can do to a stranger, to your kids. I mean, you talk about kids. I do this. If my kids were here and you brought them in here, they would be like, Noah last night, I was putting him to bed and he goes, "Why do you always tell me about me?" And I was like, "Because you're such a cool little dude." And I could tell when I do that, he wants me to do it. So he uses a way to say like, "Don't do it." But then I'm like, "But do you know this part about you, but how creative you are when you play your board games?" And I just think like the power of believing in others is just such a simple yet profound opportunity that I know changed my life, saved my life. Brian, literally that one conversation that he didn't have to have absolutely changed everything. And then so many other people poured into me after that, I wouldn't be here today. Like, that's just the reality, Craig. Most people don't go to jail twice, before they're adults and make it through the system. Like, I met many of those kids there, and many of the people I used to spend time with as a teenager, they're just not alive. Like, they just made bad decisions at wrong times that cost them their lives. And I know how lucky I am. And I just, every day I wake up just to try to honor the people that have showed up.
Man, that's a heck of a story, and powerful, powerful lessons. And so I think you have almost kind of answered my question, but maybe there's a little bit more I can squeeze out of you here, because my question for you is this: we have so many listeners out there who are parents, who work with young people. They may have teenage children. They're worried about them because they're in trouble. They're worried about them getting into trouble. And what is your advice to those parents, those leaders, those teachers, those gym coaches, those personal trainers, those sport coaches?
Yeah, I mean, different phases of the journey requires different approaches. I get the call every week from parents that are struggling with a teenager. I mean, I just posted about this yesterday. A mom, her 32-year-old son, business owner, 6 months ago got introduced to cocaine and like literally 200 grand in debt, about to lose his business. I mean, it's just how quick addiction can just take somebody that otherwise was a absolutely incredible soul and vibrant and joyful and productive and compassionate and consistent and disciplined, to just ripping all that out of who they truly are. My answer to her was a little different, because it was tough, because I talked to her about like being there for them under the right constraints. Because the challenge is when somebody is addicted, they have a sickness, right? So it's like, if you don't show up the right way, you can actually inadvertently feed the addiction, right? So being a codependent mom, and these are tough because like usually once addiction pulls onto somebody, the best you can do is just hope that by setting these constraints and these boundaries, that they'll hit rock bottom in their mind and then seek help, right? There's really nothing you can do. And most parents do the opposite of what is actually helpful, which is try to help the person stay out of trouble, lend them money, go pick them up out of prison. I mean, my dad told me the first time I went to prison, he visited, and he said, if I ever do it again, he's not coming to visit. And true to his word, he didn't visit me once for 6 months. And as a dad, I can't even imagine how hard that was. Like we've had some serious conversations since then. Today's like my hero. He literally comes to my events and all my clients love him. We call him Fit Vic. But in that moment, he did what he knew was right for me. I wasn't happy about it, but in hindsight, like I have the best dad in the world. Like he was doing. So there's that part. And then there's, before, when you have an opportunity to influence your kids, because usually between the ages of 13 to like 19, and there's a bunch of research on this, is a child will start to look outside the family unit for their identity, right? Up until that age, they're essentially the identity of the family, and the family unit is part of who they are. And so like you have an opportunity to influence them. And I think the number one thing, this is why like people ask me, like, do you let your kids on iPads? Do you do this? Do you do that? Do you let them play video? Like the number one thing I can do for my kid is to create their self-worth, period, full stop. Like that's it. Like my number one job is to make sure that my kid is high of a self-esteem, self-worth, and obviously skills like critical thinking and other problem solving and just social skills. But if they have that, then I think it counteracts the social media comparison game. It counteracts the body shaming. It counteracts the depression. It counteracts the trying to find happiness in other people's acceptance, right? Like I think for me, that's the big thing. And I do that, by essentially telling my kids, I don't praise them for outcomes. I praise them for effort. So I hope people understand the difference there. Like, if my son wins or loses a soccer game, it doesn't change anything. Now he wants, hey, did you see this? Did you see that? And then I always reframe myself. That was amazing. But you know what I'm most proud of you for, Noah or Max, is that you showed up in practice and you were consistent and you passed the ball and just, you showed up as somebody who had a winning mentality. And I always praise the effort in the process. I don't praise the outcome. And this comes from Carol Dweck's research. She wrote the book, Growth Mindset. And she says this is like, because then they're not, because life isn't about an outcome, right? Craig, you know this. It's like the mountaintop is not the mountaintop. It's the person you get to become along the journey to get to the mountaintop. And we all know that once we get there, we actually start looking around for the next mountaintop. So that can't be the thing we anchor our self-worth on. But what we can is reminding them, and this is something my buddy Todd Herman shared with me because we both had kids at the same age. And he said, like, when I'm hiking with my kids, I'll stop halfway and I'll turn around and I'll point to where we started and praise them for the distance they've covered, not talk about the gap to the top, because most people don't do that. And that's actually available to anybody at any stage of where they're at, right? Like, I remember one time somebody said to me, they go, you can't forget that your darkest days today as a business owner is somebody else's dream.
Right.
Isn't that crazy? Like, we're
That's
like,
a great
oh
point.
my God. It's a great point. Cause like there was a day when we didn't have a business and we wanted a business and we were trying to start and we might've failed. And to have anybody that has a business with employees is like this crazy, like future dream they have. And that's your reality potentially today. And that, or if you live in a country that allows you to even create a business, you know, there's parts of Eastern Europe and others that you can't even start a business unless you have like 50 grand, you know, Haiti, same thing. I've been there. Like, and so like, no matter where you're at, no matter how tough it is, even your physical shape, like some people are like, oh, I'm 20 pounds overweight. It's like, you are literally somebody's dream body.
Right.
Right. And I just think that for me as a dad is kind of an area that I try to speak into my kids. And I know it's precious time that's not going to be there forever. But yeah.
How old are your boys?
Kids, they're 9 and 10 today.
Wow.
11 months apart, Irish twins. That was a crazy period.
I used that phrase to my wife the other day, Irish twins. Ours will be 18 months apart, but yeah, 11 months apart. That's funny.
Nuts, dude. Imagine like you have a newborn. Yeah. I think it was like a month after we had the first, my wife's, was it 3 months? He was born. I can't do the math, but it was like, she just kind of got past having our first. And then it's like, oh my gosh, I'm pregnant again. I'm like, wow, that's going to be fun. Yeah. That's like having twins, but 2 different pregnancies, which is always a joy.
Yeah. Fantastic. Amazing. This has been so helpful to me already. And I know to everybody listening. So let's get into the time stuff. And so you talk about, well, I'm just going to read a part of your book that really hit me, which is you talk about how there's a little known secret to reaching the next stage of your business is spending time on only the tasks that A, you excel at, B, you truly enjoy, and C, add the highest value, usually in the form of revenue to your business. And then there's likely 2 or 3 tasks that fit this description. And every other task that you're handling is slowing your growth and sucking the life from you. And you should clear it from your calendar. Now, sounds amazing, right? How does one start doing that when they're kind of the solopreneur? And how did you start doing it? And how can our listeners start doing it?
Yeah. I mean, the story for me is I didn't know that I should do this. And I built the company Spheric. It was my 3rd company. The first 2 were failures. So I just started young, 17, then 20 when I started MB Host. Then I was 24 when I finally gave it another shot. But like real earnest shot, like life savings in all those, like 10K line of credit on the second one. Like this wasn't like side hustles. Like I was like, my dad was like, maybe you should get a normal job. And I'm like, it's not going to work for me. I know me, I'm too opinionated. I'm not going to be able. So I was doing contract work as a software developer for a while. At 24, I finally hired a business coach. This guy named Bob Simpson. He was an E-Myth coach. I read the E-Myth.
Oh yeah.
I was like, I need this. I need to build the business different because that's definitely not how I'm doing it. And over a 4-year period, became a millionaire within 3 years. Sold the company within 4. And what happened though is I became a workaholic. And I share that, Craig, because I got really good at being incredibly productive. Okay, so if you want to talk about like automation and time Pomodoro, like you name the getting things done, categorization, like, but what I discovered is there's this place that it'll bring you. And for me, and it's different for different people. I call it the pain line. And what will happen is at a certain level, that pain line will hurt so much that entrepreneurs will not grow into pain. And usually when they hit the pain line, they decide to either sell, sabotage, or stall, right? And those are never good options. And what happened for me is, 4 years into this business, I come home on a Sunday, 2:00 in the afternoon, promised my fiance at the time I'd be back at 11. Every Sunday I went into the office to get caught up. And I show up at 2, walk into our new house we just bought probably a couple months prior. And she's in tears in the kitchen and just beside herself, and literally just shakes her head and kind of says, I can't do this anymore, and takes the ring off and drops it on the counter and just says, I'm done, and walks out of the house. And that was that. Yeah. We never got back together. This was about 7 weeks before the wedding. And that was probably the moment where I realized that I was actually concerned, Craig, for probably 6 months. I was so driven. I was so hell-bent on being successful that I was worried that maybe I'm just never going to be a guy that has a marriage, that has kids, that figures this out. Like, that'll just be my reality. I'm really great at business, but I'm horrible as a person. Like, literally, I thought this to myself. And what happens, I moved to Silicon Valley and I start seeing a completely different way of operating, right? These 20-year-old kids that build $100 million companies in 7 years. I meet a guy named Naval Ravikant who became a mentor. Yeah. Naval today, he's incredibly well-known. He's been on Joe Rogan. But when I met him, this is 2008, like, a lot of his wisdom was kind of like shared to people. So I just happened to meet him. And when we were raising around for Flowtown, he got involved and he shared with me leverage. And that's what shifted. So time is constant and we can't buy more. Okay. All we can change is leverage, meaning what do we do with our time? And that equals output. And Naval talks about these 4 C's of leverage, which is, and actually Alex Hormozy calls them the 4 C's. Naval calls them something else, but it's easy to remember if we give them all the same, initial letter. But content's leverage, right? So like, this podcast could be listened by 10 million people and it changes nothing, right? There's only the initial cost. Software or code, right? The second C is code. Automation, building custom integrations, et cetera. So like, automation is huge leverage. Third is capital. You all know capital. And then the fourth is collaboration. And that's really the area this book I wanted to focus on, because every entrepreneur is hiring people typically to help them, to support them, to get their time back, to buy back their time, but they do it in the wrong order. And that's what the buyback principle is. The buyback principle states that we don't hire people to grow our business. We hire people to buy back our time. And I call it the calendar over capacity problem. Now, if you buy back your time the right way, you will actually grow your business. So you will get capacity. It's just the other way will not work, because there's a certain point where you will hit the pain line, right? Where you're not getting leverage with your time, and you'll wake up and you're the biggest risk to businesses is a CEO building a business that they grow to hate. Mm-hmm. I don't know about you, Craig, but I've been there. I've built a thing that I thought I would enjoy. And then once I got there, I was like, I hate this. And it's because I didn't understand what I was doing and how to do it. So the way to solve this problem is this framework I call the buyback loop, right? And I do this, probably people ask me like, how often do I do this? My life, because it's so dynamic, because of like the Ironman training or the other types of things I take on, every 4 months, I'm going to hit the pain line, right? And then from there, I do 3 things. I audit my calendar, right? And I know you teach this stuff. And I do a time and energy audit. So I look at everything I'm doing and I audit it for 2 weeks, 15 minutes each. And I highlight in green things that give me energy, highlight in red things that take my energy, $1 sign next to those tasks. If it's something that's inexpensive to pay somebody else to do, or $4 signs or some variation in there. $4 signs is like things that maybe only I can do or a manager can do. And then what I do is I take all the red stuff and the $1 sign stuff or the $2 sign stuff, and I put it in a bucket. And that becomes the thing that I go deploy my labor dollars on hiring. And it's funny because even today, the CEO has to go first. Like, this is what people need to understand is people are hiring team members for their executives, their management team. But step one is for the CEO to free up their calendar to actually, because they'll create the most value. My time focused on only things that light me up, that are true value creators, is going to outweigh anything a new support person or another programmer or another deal person in High Speed Ventures is going to do for us, right? And what happens is then you transfer that to the person. So it's audit, time and energy. Then it's transfer, take these things. That's a skill, as you know, like how do you package up something to give to somebody else to take over? How do you set the rules of engagements and create the measurement and stuff? And then it's fill. And fill is the part where most people fall short, because they buy back their time only to watch Netflix, scroll TikTok, sit on a beach. And that's not
Right.
my MO. My MO is I want to help entrepreneurs create more, be more artists, give more, produce more, do things that light them up. And it doesn't matter where you're starting. So when you ask like, how do people start? This is the process. And it doesn't matter if you're running 100 million a year empire or you're starting and you have no employees and you make 50 grand a year. Same process. What changes is, what do you start buying back to free up that time? So like for a lot of people, it's typically some kind of administrative assistant, part-time, and they're helping with things. If you can't afford to have somebody manage your inbox or calendar, which is where I usually recommend my clients start, then you can just start by having somebody, as you know, like in the Philippines or in some part of the world where it's cost effective. And then they just maybe do research for you or buy stuff for you, or literally just help you kind of take things that are administrative in nature off your plate. They can send emails to receivables. They can send invoices. They can do a lot of stuff. Again, you need to understand the transfer step. Like, how do you do this? But these are skills that you need to develop. And that's what the fill part is fill is free up your time to do things that make you more money. So if you're a marketer, like do more marketing, get paid. If your hourly rate's $50 and $100, $200, like buy back your time with the administrative assistant and then go do more of that as much as you can until you can't. Then you have to fill it with other stuff that increases your skills, your beliefs, or your character traits. And like, that's the cycle. And that's why it's called the buyback loop, because it never ends. To the degree that you want to grow your empire, you have to become world-class at being a time trader, because there is no other option to scale.
When your kids came along, how did that change your time habits and productivity and effectiveness? And, did that make you a better entrepreneur? Was that a real hard struggle at first? What was your story
one of the darkest and challenging periods of my life? My wife and I still joke about it. Here's what happened, Craig. Just through this like crazy world, we were living in San Francisco. I had just started Clarity, my fourth company. And she had just started an agency and she finds out she's pregnant. So it's like, I raised 1.6 million in funding. I've got investors. She's got a business partner, Heather. So like she's committed. I'm committed. We're having a kid. So then we decide to move back to Canada because we wanted to have a family around to support us. So we were building a summer home from scratch, which in itself is a big deal.
Right.
And then, so we had already started that, had the company started. And then because we were moving back, why I'm not busy. I woke up one day and thought to myself, you know what, babes, we should build our dream house. Like, if this is where we're going to raise our kids, let's make a commitment. Call my brother. He's a home builder. I said, where can we get a piece of land that looks like this? I want you to build us a house within 12 months. And he's like, dude, that's crazy. Let me look into it. And we did. So there was a period of our life. And then, as I mentioned, I have Irish twins. Okay. In a 2-year period, we started 2 companies, had 2 kids, and built 2 houses.
Wow. So
when I say it was a very challenging time in my life, like I don't even remember it. It was I had a business coach, this lady named Marcy. And I remember I went for a walk because it felt like there was an elephant sitting on my chest. And I wasn't in tears, but I was like not making sense. And she's like, are you by yourself? I'm like, yes. She goes, find a bench. And I was like, okay, I found a bench. She was like, sit down. She makes me breathe. She makes me meditate, and then she says, talk to me. And what was crazy is I told her everything that was going on. And she asked us a beautiful question. She goes, if you had to make a list of 10 things that if those things were true, your life would be dramatically easier, what would be on that list? And easier, funner, more fulfilled, what would be on that list? And it was because I was in that headspace and she gave me permission to think a little bit and dream a little bit that I wrote down a night nanny. I don't know if you've ever heard of a night nanny, Craig, but like most people.
Oh yeah, we had them down here.
Exactly. Au pair, nanny, whatever. But essentially a night nanny was something that my investor had told me about when we had our first, and we didn't because we were trying to literally we decided we're going to divide and conquer, and we have our mother-in-law and we're going to have help.
Or you get conquered.
It's like, why are you both suffering? Like, why are you both sleep deprived for what heroic act? And so what happened was got a night nanny who would show up at 9:00 at night. And then what happened is my wife was breastfeeding, but she would take the baby Max at the time, or Noah. And then she would wake up quickly, breastfeed, and then the nanny would take the baby and burp it and put it back to sleep so that Renee could, relax and I could sleep. Yeah. Huge leverage. We gave ourselves permission. We'd always had like meal prep, but we actually hired a chef. That was huge. Having somebody come in and track, cause like I put on probably 20 pounds, new dad. Yeah. Comfort eating while you're while you're like, I'm waking up in the middle of the night. All of a sudden they got these, the Danone yogurts. And I'm like, these are awesome. Like sign me up. So I eat 2 or 3 of them, but they're like 300 calories each because they're made with like super creamy. And that's why they tasted so well. So like, that was huge. Allowing ourselves to just really audit our calendar and get back to, how can we get more support in our personal lives? And because my wife, still had a business partner, Heather, and was not really working, but showing up and doing stuff. And I was running a venture-backed company and growing and traveling. And I would say like the most beautiful thing that came from that, as hard as it was giving ourselves permission to use the buyback principle to our personal lives, to the world we live in today, to hopefully inspire some people. Because I know when I share this, some people, they either get inspired or they get irritated because they're like, ooh, it must be nice, but the truth is we have a full-time dedicated house manager, and she is the CEO of anything personal my wife and I would have to manage. And when I say that, I really mean everything. So it means maintenance. Like if I go mountain biking, I smash my phone, I come home and I give it to Betty and a new one shows up, or deals with my insurance companies and make sure all our insurance are up to date on all our vehicles and our houses and all that stuff, takes care of maintenance, takes care of course. Like it's to the point now where there's a team that she has, like Sarah, our house cleaner's here today, like, and she manages the coordination stuff. She manages passports expiring. She manages registration, like literally anything, going to stores, purchasing, putting things together. Sometimes she'll hire people to support her, but like for the most part, she does that for us. And because of that, Renee and I can be 100% present for our kids. We have easily each 40 hours extra a week. We're not spending weekends, getting through the honey-do list stuff. We're going skiing. We're staying active. Like we get to spend time with our kids and go to their school stuff and their sports stuff. And like between my executive assistant and my house manager, and she reports to my executive assistant, that's the structure I created. And in the book, I have a whole chapter on just managing executive assistant that's quite unique than I think how most people do it. And the last chapter is actually the buyback lifestyle, where I unpack how my house manager and how we integrate this stuff into our lives. It's like, I would sell everything I own and before I would ever get rid of those 2 people. Does that make sense, Craig? Like
totally makes sense.
I would downsize. I would literally sell my company, sell my car, downsize my house. And I would keep those 2 people because there's no other form of leverage for the investment that's higher. And a ton of different reasons too. It's energetics, it's health, right? Because I don't have to think about my nutrition because it's already been designed and decided and taken care of. There's no decision fatigue. Like I don't know what I'm having for lunch, but I know it's going to hit my macros and my caloric intake. And I know dinner's figured out. And like just, there's so many side benefits. It isn't even just like the time component that is intangible.
Mm-hmm. And I think that it's really important for people listening to go, again, they're going to be like, oh, that must be nice. You just listen to 3 people.
Start there.
So yeah, I mean, you go to Upwork.com, you go to Fiverr.com, you get some virtual assistant. And I mean, like, instead of you going to Amazon and buying something, you just say, hey, I need 3, frozen teething things and, some diapers, and like go to Amazon, buy all this stuff, make sure it gets sent to my house. Or like here in Mexico, we have Corner Shop. Like we just send our list to our assistant and they do these things.
And I use voice, shows up. Right? Yeah. We use Voxer. My wife and I, we have one channel for the house, and it's literally my wife and I just seeing stuff that needs taken care of. And we just drop little voice notes, and Betty picks it up and replies and says, add it to the list, and like, we know it's taken care of. And it's just, and again, when I was starting off, it was dry cleaning, like wash and fold.
Sure. Exactly.
Right. It was somebody coming in for 2 hours a week to clean. This is not, but a lot of people can't, there's a belief around even that stuff that stops people. Cause I've coached a lot of founders on this topic. It's why I wrote a book on it.
Yeah.
And the belief of like guilt. So specifically women more so than men. I've coached a lot of women CEOs and they're just like, my mother-in-law is already judgmental of the fact that this and this happens.
Do you know Shanda Sumpter?
I do. Yes.
So I love speaking to Shanda's group because I come on and I do this presentation. I'm like, I know your mother-in-law is going to, give you a hard time, but you shouldn't be cooking. You shouldn't be cleaning. You shouldn't be doing this, this, and this. You weren't put here on this earth to do these things. Oprah doesn't do these things. You shouldn't do these things. I love doing that because they're like, oh my God, I can't believe you said this and gave me permission to do it. And even if they just stop one of those things, it buys back their time, as you said. And it's so important. But, I grew up on a farm in Canada and my mom is 81 years old. And she has a very large piece of property. She still does her gardening and all this stuff. And she gets her 85-year-old brother to cut the lawn and she does the push mower stuff. And whenever she comes and sees me and all the things that I don't do, she doesn't understand it. And I get a little bit of that, German farm mom guilt. But I just falls right off me, fortunately, because I'm pretty lazy. I'm selectively lazy. But that's the approach that I try to help other people with, because I think what it comes down to, my little line is, you weren't put here on this earth to do it because you got other things, bigger things to do.
And there's opportunity to create employment. Like that was one of I had a client, Aaron, and his wife was not on board. And he's like, I don't know how to get through to her. And I said, well, all right, let's try this angle, right? Because I'll attack it. And I have a whole chapter called the Time Assassins because I had to address the belief side.
Yeah.
And I said, well, why don't you let her know, try it, $500 for a month. Let's just try it. Let's just have someone come in. And also let her know, like, we're creating employment in our community. Mm-hmm. Like, look, we have the means. This guy was making probably netting $500,000 a year. $500 a month was a zero, nothing. Yeah. And to the person that now gets a new client. And I said, you guys are a pretty cool family. I'm sure like you're going to take care of her and, support her and Christmas presents. And he's like, of course. It's like, that's what I do for my team. I was like, great. So like, let your wife know, like, this is how you can support your community. Because the challenge was he was here and like, I don't have time to go to the gym. I don't have time to do this. I'm running around all the time. It's like, babes, I love you. I want to support you, but we need to allow. And that's the language that I try to teach people is I want to invite and encourage and release control to have support.
Yeah.
I don't call it shit work. I don't call it the stuff I don't want to do. I don't call it like menial tasks. I don't call it, and I get that it's not beneath me either. Right. Like you want to talk about kids, Craig? So Betty works for us. She does not work for my two boys. She is not allowed to flush the toilet behind them, to pick up their backpacks, to clean their rooms, to do anything. She literally is our team, not their team.
That's a great
very
tip.
Important distinction. Because they said to me once, they go like, but you don't pick up after yourself. And I go, I know. And when you get to a place where you can have a team to support you, then you don't have to pick up after yourself. But until that point, it's your mess. You pick it up.
That's a good one. I like that. Now, speaking of your boys, what were the most difficult ages? So they're 9 and 10 now. So in the last decade, aside from obviously when, they were helpless, what was another really difficult period? So, preparing me for this period in my life.
It's kind of funny because it's two sides of a coin. It was my favorite age, 3 to 4, 3 to 5, because they were like little people that were like coming up with it's when they start like seeing things and talking and exploring and doing cute stuff. But at the same time for us, like one of our kids, Noah, just had a hard time going to bed at night. So it was like always this like 45-minute thing. Our other son, didn't play well with other kids. So there was that. So it was challenging in that regards, but it was also my favorite. So it's literally when I see like our buddies, Nick and Farron, they come over and they've got little Levine and Eden, and they're like 3 and 4. And they're just like my favorite age because they're like super fun and squishy and all that stuff. But, behind the scenes, I'm sure they do stuff with their parents that frustrate them. And it's funny because like, even while my kids are going through that, my wife would ask me, she's like, does he act that way with just you? And I'm like, no. She's like, why? So like, it's even funny that parental experience could be different. Like how your kids act solo with you, Craig, may be completely different than with your wife. So that's why it'll be a different, what was a hard age could be different for different people. But yeah, I would say it was tough for those reasons, just like one nighttime routine and the other one just like getting in trouble at like school and daycare, but they both outgrew it. And I think the reason why is we were just consistent. Like if my wife and I invest in us as parents, like we just had our family coach come live with us for 3 days. Like flew her up from California, came and lived with us, slept at our house, woke up in the morning and would walk through the routine with us to give us coaching. That is, people will invest in their business, no problem. They'll invest in their health, no problem. They'll invest in their marriage, no problem. But it's very rare you see people invest in their family and in their kids as a, like having somebody that comes and looks at your interactions with your child to give you some real honest feedback, right? Like a coach would.
Huh. Yeah.
And that was invaluable.
Interesting. It's really fascinating. Dan, this has been really, really fun conversation. I don't want to take up any more of your time. Just tell everybody, so it's buybackyourtime.com to get all the great bonuses and everything that come with your book, right?
Yeah. And if you want, you can go buy it on all the different websites. I did the book deal with Penguin Random House.
Oh, cool.
Incredible partners. Yep. And I'm on a mission to start a movement to help entrepreneurs, much like yourself, just look at their time differently. Because my goal is to create language around this to force people to confront where their deficit is. Like even in the book, I had to add some leadership content and frameworks because most CEOs are self-inflicting. I call it emotional shrapnel amongst their team. So just because I teach you how to buy back your time, if you show up a certain way, you're not going to keep these people, or you're going to be super critical and they're going to leave. So that may resonate with some of the listeners because they keep hiring and firing all the time. There's only one person that's responsible for that. It's the guy that's looking at you in the mirror. And I really want to like help CEOs become more fully developed, mature leaders so that they can live this really cool lifestyle, building an empire.
Yeah, this is fantastic. We do plan on moving back to the Vancouver area in the next couple of years. So when I do, maybe I'll take up biking and come up to Kelowna.
Yeah, either I come to you or you come to me. But summertime in Kelowna, wake surfing, mountain biking, wineries, it's a pretty good deal.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Last question. Any last advice for a new father like myself?
Yeah, one thing I did that I thought was really important. My buddy Jim Shields wrote a book called Family Board Meetings. And I've been doing these every quarter since they were 3. And essentially you can read the book to get the gist of it, but it's a dedicated half day, one-on-one with each one of your kids doing only things they want to do that ends with a meal. And there's a series of questions that you ask during the meal. And it's really to create a rhythm for intentionality around just play. And because a lot of times with parents, I think we get into this, like, I don't want to do that, or I don't want to do this, or like, and I'll tell you, if my kids were here and I said, hey, what do you think of board meetings? It's their favorite thing we do. So and what we do is we alternate. So my wife and I will each take a kid. And then, so like Saturday will be on the board week. We do them on weekends. So like board meeting Saturday, I'll take one, Renee will take one, and then we swap.
Oh, I think this guy spoke at Yannick's event years ago.
Very likely. Yeah. He's talked about this quite a bit. And I would say probably that. And I made a list of about 16 character traits that I wanted to teach my kids. And every week when I did like hikes with them or mountain biking or went walks in the woods, I would pick one and I put it in my calendar. So it's like, okay, this is critical thinking. This is, how to introduce yourself. Like that sounds crazy, but I literally taught my kids when they're little how to say hello to somebody, high five them, ask them for their name, and use it. Like simple stuff. So those 2 things are probably the most, I think, minimum effective dose, biggest return.
Fascinating. Thank you so much, Dan. I really, really appreciate you. Appreciate your time. Appreciate that you bought some time for us. And this is really fantastic. I'm wishing you all the best with the book.
Thanks, Craig. It's an honor. Appreciate it.